Greetings! It's I, Titus Narravan Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor, here at the Dracovin Empire on both YouTube and Twitch, and welcome you to once again talking about tabletop. I hope you're ready for an exciting and a little bit of a long one here, because strap in, kids, we're going to be talking about more Pathfinder and more Golarion, and talking about one of the oldest and basically history-rich nations in all of the Golarion/Pathfinder lore, Taldor. It's gonna be a bit of a long one. Not that to say that there aren't a lot of other countries that have a lot of other information. You know, there are some out there, but certainly there's a lot on Taldor. It is a very important nation to the entire setup. So we'll talk about it here. So let's just honestly dive into where I normally dive in, rather than get a lot more spiel other than that, you know. I like to talk about some books I can recommend for you to check out to look into this a little bit yourself. Now, there's a lot of these. I'm going to say that first. A whole bunch of these books that you can look through for the same information I have, or diving deeper into Taldor itself. And I recommend checking all these out to get this. So, the campaign settings, Pathfinder Chronicle books from 1st edition. Of course, Inner-Sea World Guide from 1st edition. These are very good books that provide you the initial basis of Taldor. From 2nd edition, the Lost Omens World Guide is a very good place to see the updated information on Taldor based on what's going on in the 2nd edition world. Some other ones that dive deeper into it, of course, are Taldor, the First Empire, one of the campaign setting books from Pathfinder Companion, Taldor Echoes of Glory, and some other books that mention a few of the cities or locations, cities of Golarion, and, of course, Faction Guide. I'd recommend you go looking at all these books if you want to do some research on yourself on Taldor, or you could just join me, and honestly, you can look up some of this stuff too. Some good wiki pages and stuff to check out. So, let's talk about what Taldor is. So, Taldor is a country. It is a place of fair maidens, heroic adventures, righteous quests. A lot of the old stories that are very like that and are kind of lore and stuff in the Golarion world come from old Taldor, a 6,000-ish year old empire. And it was one of the most powerful empires to ever exist in the Avastian area of Golarion, on the continent of Avastia. It is fallen heavily from its glory, and its rival nobles battle with each other. Bitter knights, proxy armies battle with each other for power and honor amongst the people there. It's at a truce with Qadira, one of its neighbors, that's very close to, once again, igniting into war. The former states that were connected with Taldor, its daughter states, many of them view Taldor with contempt more than anything. But the thing is, there is still greatness in Taldor. It has a stone foundation that was built up over those thousands of years that might have gold adornments that are flaking off and breaking apart now. But still, there are a lot of people of noble blood that still will live up to the greatness of their ancestors. So there's this always question about Taldor as it is today in modern Golarion. Is this place here going to have some kind of research? Is there enough greatness left in it to have more strength? Or is it just more rattling of a dying empire that is long past its prime? Certainly it's past its prime. Doesn't mean it can't rise again. So it's a bureaucratic empire. Language is, of course, it's common, which is Taldane, Kelish. And it's ruled over by the Grand Princess Eutropia Stavian, from the capital of Oppara, O-P-P-A-R-A. Let's, though, talk about the original history and some of the history of Taldor. We start with this man here. This man here, which is a very important man, who's the first emperor of Talos. So, when we look at its region, it stretched from the windswept wastes of Casmaroon all the way across Avastia to the Arcadian Ocean. It was an enormous empire. It had areas that incorporated into it Galt, Andoran, Isdar, Mothun, Cheliax, Nargoth, Lastwall. And that heyday fell in the first half of the Age of Enthronement, and has a lot of defeats and setbacks, but still the territory of Taldor is still one of the largest in the entire Inner Sea region, and it is the oldest. Now, it descended from people from Aztec, the great culture that was destroyed in Earthfall, the Age of Darkness, the place that basically the continent was wiped out in Earthfall. The planet was saved, the continent that the Aslanti were on was not. But some of the survivors came here, and they forged a small settlement in the area that would become Apara. So, Apara is old. It was settled by basically Aslant survivors. Now they intermarried with the local humans, and these descendants would become the core of what would be Taldans. And they also trade with the Kelishite tribes to the east. And these connections with Kelishite blood, the local blood, built what would be the ethnicity of Taldane people. Now, Talaris, who's shown right here, was a young military leader of the city-state of Opera. So we're not even like country of Opera. We are a city-state. He was named heir to the Grand Prince of Opera prior to his predecessor's death in negative 1295. And this was when we get the birth of the Taldane Empire, the Empire of Taldor. He used his tactical prowess, superior forces, and luck. He basically led his troops on a 12-year-long conquest, beginning in negative 1293, and transformed his title in Opera to a fledgling unified nation of city-states. Basically conquered all the city-states in the area. He attacked the larger cities along the Inner Sea coast that would pose a great threat. He secured their alliances and resources. He turned his attention toward distant settlements in the area. And he declared his new nations the Principalities of Taldoris. And he ruled over an area from the Inner Sea coast to the southern Verduin forest to the Jalrun River. And the Principality of Taldoris became Taldor in negative 1281, with Taldoris crowned the first Emperor of Taldor. So he had a number of years of the principalities, and then they're like, no. I'm the Emperor with Taldor. But it was named after him. Now, things wouldn't all be great here, and one of the reasons that things, there were still some difficulties in this large point is, dun 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 dun, our good friend here. Who is this? Well, when the Tarrasque rampaged across the World's Edge mountains into Taldor in negative 632, Apara was destroyed. Of course, Taldor suffered from this, and eventually recover, but a lot of wounds from this basically rampage by the Tarrasque, who, if you are unaware, very powerful monster, basically also known as the Armageddon engine, in Pathfinder lore is the most powerful spawn of Rovagug. This was it emerging from the pit of Gormas. In Kazmaron. Basically destroyed a lot of stuff. Got, imprisoned in Avastian, and there are actually national holidays in nations like Taldor and Osirian that celebrate the sealing of. So but it did also rampage across northern Grund and stuff too, so it did a lot of damage, and Taldor was also one that suffered heavily from the Tarrasque's rampage. But they recovered, and which technically led them more towards what would be called their Golden Age. So, a lot of the old tribes that were from the founding were conquered by soldiers from the Empire of Kelish in negative 43, and found the Saptri of Quatria, fortified the border between the new nations, and the conflict between that settles today. So basically, Kelish, Quadria, fortified two of the boundaries between Taldor early on, like negative 43 AR. This marked the places where Taldor was not going to spread to the east or to the south, but they could spread north and west. And they needed to grow and expand. And it wasn't till the Age of Enthronement in Zero that they became an empire. They were just this territory that had secured themselves. They formed themselves into this like fledgling kingdom almost, not quite empire yet, maybe little E empire, not big E empire, you know, that kind of thing that they say in like history classes for us. But what they did were the army of exploration, the armies of exploration is what I should talk about them. The founding of the first army of exploration, which was a legendary collection of soldiers, scholars, diplomats, surveyors, spies, and adventurers. They headed north around Selin River from Opera in 37, conquering all the way to Seven Arches, what is Seven Arches today in the River Kingdoms. So they conquered a massive swath to the north. It was led by General Porthmos and was very successful. And that was very early on. The efforts were then enlarged again with the second army of exploration in 499 AR, who traveled farther than the first, all the way to what would be the edges of the hold of Belkazin. They explored the lands around Lake Encartha. They expanded their military and economic reach, with supply depots that would become larger settlements overall. So they ran into the orcs, of course, and they explored places in Numeria, Nurmath, Mothun. But again, getting to that region, they kind of stalled out because of local hostile locals, dwindling supplies. They did make friendly connections with the Dwarf of Kragadon, who made treaties with them. And they were more than willing to cede the region as now Nirthmas, because it was a buffer between them and the hold of Belkazin anyway. They're like, you know, we'll succeed that area to you. You can control and keep the orcs out. Now, of the armies of exploration, the third was the most successful. Again, Opera, as most of them do. It clung to the northern coast of the Inner Sea, conquering westward all the way to the Arcadian Ocean, where they founded the city of Corianton in 150 or 1520 AR under General Corin, basically securing western access to the Inner Sea by the Empire. They created a massive defensive earthwork in that region. On the opposite side of the Empire, the Third Army built a military outpost in Gazmern, which is now Razmirin. They secured the basically northern coast for Taldor. It was basically their greatest expansion at this point in time. And this was the last time we had as much success with the armies of exploration. And so many great people were remembered during this time period too. Now, though this was the most successful, this isn't the end of it all. In 1553, Grand Prince Ulros II and Satrap Zerbisti I signed a peace agreement between Taldor and Qadira that became the Urian Peace. And this would last for 2,500 years. So this was a pretty big peace between these two groups. It lasted a very long time. There were hostilities. Now remember, I told you, there were hostilities with the Quadrians and what was going on with Kelish for, at this point, nearly 1,500 years. But we have now 2,500 years of peace. Now, the Fourth Army of Exploration, much more minor success than the Third, but they did manage to bring the areas of Andoran under control, the region that would become Andoran. And by 1683, they did have a brief, unsuccessful foray into the Five Kings Mountains. They defeated the native tribes in Artfell Forest, and Andoran became a province of Taldor in 1707. So there was some success with the Fourth Army too, but not as much. Now, The 5th Army of Exploration pushed back north through what the Riven Kingdoms were, reaching the end of Iborian in 2009 AR. After which they turned back and mapped any branches of the Selin River and were finished up by 2014. So, basically the 5th Army followed what the 1st Army did, went beyond where the River Kingdoms would be today, branched a lot of the rivers. They used a massive magical siege engine called Worldbreaker during the campaign, which turned into a monument placed on Worldbreaker Hill in Opera after it was decommissioned. One of the veterans of this, Maldar Taimon, founded the city-state of Taimon in the River Kingdoms during this time period. And he was granted this land by the Empire. So, now, things are changing for Taldor. As I said, the 3rd Army exploration, spreading the Empire, conquering lands, controlling lands, mapping lands, because that's the thing is also, these were unknown to a lot of people in their region. They were going to areas of their continent that were unexplored. That, sure, they might have had people there, maybe, but no major civilizations existed. No countries existed in these regions. They conquered and brought countries, civilization, not always the nicest way. You know, it's Rome conquering France, you know. There were going into, you know, Germany and stuff like that. There were people there. They might have been considered barbarians by the people. They weren't treated nicely. But the further armies of exploration, not as successful. So, they had success, but they'd had a number of serious blows during this period. Raiders from the land of Linaran kings wreaked havoc on settlers in western Cheliax, and they forced a naval engagement in 2000 AR that Taldor barely won. Ulfin raiders counterattacked in 2003, savaging Taldan colonies near the Arch of Eredin, and demanding 100,000 gold pieces for hostage. Taldor capitulated. They signed a peace treaty between the Ulfin king and the Taldan Grand Prince at the time. And then, less than a century later, we had the 6th Army of Exploration, which was a disastrous campaign, not anywhere on their contests, but down into Gurun, into the Mwangi Expanse. And it led to a massacre known as the Battle of Nagasa, by the forces of that era's guerrilla king in 2089. And this failure, the 6th Army of Exploration, they've never recovered from. It lost the magical engine Worldbreaker to Guerrilla King after pulling it from its foundations in Opera. So remember I said Worldbreaker was kind of put into place. They pulled it, brought it with them. It was thousands of militiamen from Andorra. They entered the Expanse from the east via the Nettle Gap in Nex. They made it far as the rumored signal of Nagasa, where that's where they were ambushed and slaughtered. They wanted to use this, to penetrate the western coast and basically move back and conquer the entire inner sea region. But this was the beginning of the end for basically what this is. It was a great setback. So, there was one more official of the time army of exploration that did occur. The 7th. Taldan was not going to expand into Grund at all at this point in time. So they continued their strength and position in Vasti. And that's when the 7th Army officially claimed Isker in 2133. This final large territorial expansion, and the final large territorial expansion came in 3007, when they claimed the entire territory of Cheliax, but without an army of exploration at that point in time. So as we get to the 4th millennium AR, well, now we're into decline, falling apart. Taldor is just not doing as well anymore. They have not recovered from the loss of manpower and that great military defeat. They did some things, but it was just it's flailing about at this point in time. They still dominate the Inner Sea region, controlled the shores of the Northern Inner Sea, but the government bloated. There's the bureaucracy members numbered in the tens of thousands. The territory was too large to control. Corruption in the government. The ruling class began to pursue decadent pleasures instead of good governance. There was a growing indifference. The places furthest from the capital began to revolt. And Taldor's military responded with brute force to quell them, but it was discontent and unrest. Now, the next big moment, though, was the Shining Crusade. Taldor had fallen from a lot of its power at this point in time. It was still a dominant nation in the Inner Sea region. They challenged any foe. So, when the existence of the Whispering Tyrant in Ustalav, a region very close to their control, became a problem, they led the Shining Crusade for decades. They cooperated with the dwarfs of Kragadum, the Knights of Osman, and they fought against the forces of the Whispering Tyrant in his control of Ustalav. It began in 3754, and that ended in 3827 with his defeat and the founding of the country of Lastwall next year. So that was a big moment in their history, the last big moment of their true history we can talk about. Now things finally turn from this great heroics to a bloody conflict that ends in their defeat, in a way. Taldor had been focusing on internal revolts. In Qadira broke their treaty. They took advantage of the situation, invaded the southeast in 4079. Basically, they recalled their armies from outlying provinces to protect the Heartland because Qadira was very close to their capital. The war, dubbed the Grand Crusade, lasted 524 years. During this time, with the military mostly back east, Cheliax rebelled. King Aspect the Eventongue declared independence in 4081 in the Eventongue Conquest. And of course, Taldor was tied up with Qadira. They could not respond. And Aspects annexed Andorra, Gult, Isgar, and then signed a peace treaty that recognized independence. At the same time, Lastwall declared its independence from both Taldor and Cheliax, stating it wished only to focus on containing the Whispering Tyrant and not become involved in neighboring political concerns. So they basically, Lastwall also in a way rebelled, but they were basically like, hey look, we're going off on our own. We're going to do this thing that's very important, So, without Cheliax, this big war with Qadira, Taldor's power just fell. And Taldor remained in decline several generations even after this time. And the corruption of that bureaucracy still was there. The lower class stricken with poverty. Its prefectures fight border skirmishes. Noble houses fight each other. The sparsely populated frontiers become more lawless. And most of what keeps the empire alive is its money. Because it accrued a vast wealth during this period, during its heyday. So, then we have religious upheaval. The Church of Eredin, in response to the corruption that was going on in Taldor's ruling class during the Grand Campaign, moved its central worship from Taldor to Cheliax. During that same conflict, Prince Stavian I began what was known as the Great Purge. He believed that Qadira's invasion of Taldor had been assisted by members of the Cult of the Downflower, so he outlawed the worship of Sarenrae in 4528, which was not again legalized until after the Grand Campaign in 4603. That leads us to the last Army of Exploration. Yes, they did another one, and only about, 200 years ago, in 4606. They were desperate to revitalize the nation. So General Orpheria Asmar set sail to find a new land to rule far to the east. Battered by storms, months after leaving port, weathered by the death of Eredin, they arrived ashore in Shinmin in Tianzi. The army disembarked the city of Kamakobu in 4608, defeated a dozen bandit warlords, and took control of the region, renaming the city New Opera and founding the nation of Amandar. I'm going to butcher this. Amandar. Which is, technically a colony of Taldor in the heart of the continent of Tianzi. Which is a connection that Taldor has to a continent in the east. It is something that actually strengthens some of Taldor, as they do have now connections between the continent on the other side of the world, kind of, and theirs. Strong ones. They have a country there. They conquered a basically lawless region, and made it. We'll have to talk about a little bit more Amandar as something. It's a very interesting story of existence. Now, the last thing to mention is, hey, let's talk about an adventure path. Look at this wonderful, wonderful individual here. Well, our last thing about Taldor and its history is related to an adventure path that happened in Pathfinder 1e, so now the information that happened is cemented in 2e. Grand Prince Stavian III, basically in 4781, or 4718, effectively in the book series. In the... when you're trying to, there it is. In the Crownfall adventure path, I think it is. No, not the Crownfall. Oh, no, War of the Crown. I'm sorry. The War of the Crown adventure path. And Crownfall is the name of a lot of stuff on it. So, War of the Crown adventure path, you could play out what's going to happen here in your own way, but this is the canonical ending. So Grand Prince Stavian III ordered mercenaries to slaughter half the Taldane Senate and his only remaining heir, the Princess Eutropia. I'll talk about it in a second, but the short end of the story is Taldane has always been patriarchal. Men has taken the crown, and there was no male heir at this point in time, and basically the Senate was looking to change it to have a female be able to take the crown. Guess what happened? Princess Eutropia has become the Grand Princess, the first female ruler of Taldor. Good for her. A good change for that. She's hoping to change the Empire a little bit. That's going to be really hard. The Empire's really great in its really ancient ways. But anyway, this happened during the Great Day of Exaltation in Opera. It sparked a civil war, known as the War of the Crown. The Grand Prince lost his life, daughter survived, and gained the throne and the Grand Princess, being the first Grand Princess in Taldor's history. So, good for her, because it is Grand Prince, Grand Princess, That's what they're called. So, yeah, good on them. Let's talk about some geography of the region, because there are some interesting things there. In a general thing, we're going to talk about it for a second, but one of the big areas in the area is the Verduin Forest. The Verduin Forest, we'll talk about, kind of borders Andorra, Taldor, and kind of that entire region there. So, in Taldor, they have the Treaty of the Wildwood between the native druids of Wildwood Lodge and the Taldan Empire that was signed in 3841. They needed timber and didn't want to go against the druids' preservationist agenda because they wouldn't get the timber at all. The forest is a semi-autonomous prefecture. We'll talk about that. So there's limited logging, hunting in the forest. Certain areas are defined. Druids have a headquarters on the Isle of Erinway, at the conflux of the Verduin Fork and the Selin River. And, yeah. So, it covers a lot of northern Taldor, and kind of moves into swamps and areas today, like the Blackwood swamps, wetlands of Terrace Prefecture, Lushurian Lake, Anyway, so that's a big region there that we can talk about. The Verdun Forest once covered a lot of Taldor, but a lot of places there's now grasslands there and low scrub. The southern part of the country can generate tumble fires, which are weather that can occur with a thunderstorm without rain. Lightning flashes can kind of create ball lightning on the ground, sometimes little fires and stuff too. There was more settlements and stuff around a lot of areas and extents of the Empire, but things have kind of drawn back. The boundaries, though, are to the north, the Fog Peaks, separating Taldor from Galt. The Sullen River through the Verdun Forest kind of breaks the border there, between their sections of the Verdun Forest in Taldor and outside of it. Western, and that borders with Andoran. To the east, the World's Edge Mountains and the Whistling Plains are a buffer between Taldor and the Empire of Kelish. And of course, to the south, the Juan River and the Zimar scrubland separate them from Qadira, which is technically a septrant of Kelish, but that's thing to talk about in a different future. Of course, the river Porthmos is the most important place here. It's the main river that goes through the entire nation. It's the water. It supplies the grasslands. Opera is on its mouth. So it's a very important place. You've got other important places. I mentioned the Blackwood Swamps, which are around Casimir, the major port city. We'll talk about that in a minute. Other locations, of course, the Borderwood, which is on the opposite side of the Jermor River, in an area disputed by Taldor and Quadrain, and only has one strong settlement there, Demgazi, which was built in the forest edge, and is basically a defensive city between the two nations. The Fog Peaks are vastly controlled to basically keep people from Galt from showing up, because Galt has its own problems, and they want to control borderlands. So the Fog Peaks are actually pretty heavily watched. The tallest mountain in Taldor is Mount Kalatfar, which is a dormant volcano in the southern range of the World's Edge Mountains, east of the border town of Zimar. And an ancient white dragon known as the Great White Worm is said to dwell there, even though he hasn't been spotted for about a century. So the Porthmos Gath is a large plain. I talked about it. It's between the southern range of eastern Taldor and the World's Edge Mountains. It's bordered by the Porthmos River in Sardis Township. And it was something that was created by, dun dun dun, the Tarask, when he tore through that area. The Porthmos Gath is a scar in the land by the Tarask. So the terrain remains after the Tarask was jagged, devastated. Most of the land is sheared clean plateaus, deep rigid canyons. So yeah. Porthmos Gath, scar of the Tarask. I mentioned the Porthmos River. I should mention the Selen River, of course, is very important because, again, it connects the border there. And, of course, the World's Edge Mountains, which has the southern and northern ranges. We'll talk about the geography. All right. That's just some geography shout-out for some places you find out. Let's talk about this nice lady here, who is, in fact, the Grand Princess Trubrian. And that's her pet dog, Halgudis. So, the Grand Prince, or Princess in this most recent time, is a hereditary title of who sits upon the Lion Throne. Basically, the throne which marks you as the ruler of Taldor. Basically, ancient law that had succession that males could only inherit was basically overturned as part of the Civil War by the Senate. And so now, she's on the throne. She is quite skilled in diplomacy and arbitrates a lot of disputes. She's assisted by, and look, you're going to have to get into this entire thing because it's an adventure path and a lot of weird shit happens, by her resurrected brother, Carius, who was resurrected 20 years after he died, so he's technically 20 years younger physically, even though there's a lot more to that. Anyway, he has strong spiritual connection to some of Taldor's historic rulers because of reasons that I'm not going to get into. But he's not in a position to take the rule in anyway, so he just acts as an advisor to her. And they actually have been able to heal some of the deep divisions that were caused by the Civil War. A resurrected person who spiritually has connected with great emperors of the past, and the first queen, who's actually very diplomatic, or first princess on the throne, who's very diplomatic herself. But again, their efforts aren't complete. many rivals exist out there who are waiting for power, hatching plots and stuff like that. So, Taldor does have a decadent noble class, loaded with titles, renowned for being short-sighted and lethargic. Bureaucracy is headed by the senatorial class. I mentioned senator. Much of the government is left in the hands of the senatorial class, who argue over jurisdiction. While there's fighting positions of the nation's vast, complex bureaucratic, there's greed, lack of trust, assassinations, betrayals are often also methods that can happen there. So, the thing about Taldan rulers is because they can't trust their life with Taldans, because they might have political ties, mixed loyalties, they're served by the Ulfengard. Remember the Ulfen that they had a battle with, they mentioned to getting like a peace with? Well, a handpicked regiment of mercenaries from the lands of Linor and King were paid handsomely and only cared for their oaths and duty to the crown. So it's sort of like they're getting mercenaries from the Linor Kings who are incredibly honorable. They live up to their oath. They get a lot of money, so they only have a duty to the crown itself. You know. And again, they aren't really lawful people. They are oath keepers. They exist to protect the bearer of the Primasian crown. The Primasian crown being the crown that the Grand Prince or Princess wears to mark themselves ruler of Taldor. And of course, this means safeguarding the person that has it to a T. So the Grand Princess, they protect. Their goal is to protect the Emperor, Empress. So the Ulfengard is a powerful force that you don't want to mess with. They're very militaristic. They're Ulfren military mercenaries, and their order is very important. And they were formed in 3129 and have been protecting people in the Imperial side since then. So it's a very interesting kind of thing. Okay, let's talk about the cities and prefectures of Taldor. And we'll finish up the rest of the stuff to talk about today, but this is going to be a big section of talking about today. Take a breath, take a drink, get ready for it. So, let's define territories in Taldor, because we have to talk about historically. There's been a lot of land that's been controlled over the millennia, and there have been claims of ownerships, all kinds of problems. So after thousands of years of being an empire, basically, to standardize the chaos of control, the Land Partition Decree was established in 3247. At the time, it broke the empire to 62 prefectures and formalized the rules for changing divisions within each. Today, there are 12. Remember, that was back in the height of it. There are only 12 left today. But there's also 2 major provinces that are recognized. The prefectures are, I'm going to read them off here and I'm going to talk about them in cities. Avon, Kazun, Kiris, Lygos, Lingen, Moda, Northern Tanduk, Aparos, Porthmos, Safara, Kandak, White Marsh Prefecture, and the Verduin and World's Edge provinces. Whew. That's a bunch. So, anyway. Let's talk about these provinces and the cities within them a little bit. We'll just mention a little bit about some of these provinces and what you can find there. So the Avon Prefecture is the northernmost of all the political districts. It stretches from the Fog Keith to the north, the Falling River in the south, the Verduin Forest to the west, and the only settlement of note is the city of Yanmas. It's the largest city in the northern forest, connects Taldor to Casmarin for trade. Other places are Vigel's Rest, small outposts, and the Fog Creek are geographical features. And of course, Yanmas. There isn't a lot of information on Yanmas to talk about it. It's a big trade city. It connects up with Casmarin. Population lives in solid buildings. A thriving group of traders that live outside the city proper. Depending on the time of year, the entire places can triple in size. And one of the branches of the military, the Taldan Horse, are placed here. I'll talk about the military in the future. Just know that. But that's the Avon Prefecture. There's the Haslan Prefecture. It serves as the breadbasket and is nearby to the capital city. Stretched from the river's northmost and the southwesternmost foothills to the World's Edge Mountains in the north, and it's between Othros and Porthmost prefectures. The Grand Duchess Melina Desmarani is the current ruler of it. Settlements are Breezy Creek, Eagle Head, and Pittshaven. Eagle's Head I can talk a little bit about. It has a big amphitheater. The settlement basically assembles around every summer while the theater is in season. So it's known for its basically big shows that it has. So if you ever want to go check out a show in Eagle's Head. Got a big old theater. And it's connected to the Lion's Blaze, which we'll talk about too in the future. Don't worry about them. They're part of the military. We'll talk about them. The Creus Prefecture is an inland prefecture with the highest population. It's north of the Falling River, and it lies in northern Taldor, between the Falling River and the North World's Edge Mountains, and south of Verdun Forest in the west. Can't say much about other than that. Grand Duke Borad Helskiar rules. The Lygos Prefecture is an agriculture area and the playground of Opera's elite. The Grand Duchess Dalstidia Solitari, I'm probably butcher some of these names, in charge of it recently. It's the ancestral home of House Lothiu, which still holds a significant portion of land. The family is distracted with holdings elsewhere in the lands falling disrepair, as people being overtaxed. The Lingvin Prefecture is in the southern part of the country, north of Moda and the Sofra Prefectures. Grand Duchy Morin, whose names? Zelvingian is in charge of it. The Moda Prefecture, of course, is located on the Inner Sea. It contains the western Rushing Marshes, the port city of Galsifar, and the towns of Merciful Bay and Railful. Just trying to say these names sometimes, it's just a little... Ruler is Grand Duchess Nestor Delridia. God, these names. I can't really say much about the sort of cities there. They're small towns. But just to note for important information, Golzafar is a staging point for the Taldan Imperial Navy. So the settlement, unsurprisingly, has heavy military leanings. So that's the big important thing about that one. Alright, let's continue with the Northern Tanduk Prefecture, which is from the Verdun Forest to the Fog Peaks in the west and the Broken Bridge River, with the Grand Duchess Britizia Falspar in charge. Then the Aparos Prefecture, which is the capital. It contains the capital city of Opera. So, I mean, it's between the Tanduk and Moda prefectures. Let's talk about Opera briefly, because we can talk about their capital. It's the largest city in the realm. It's an ancient, thriving city. It's known as the Gilded City, with many roofs and spires that were once glittered with gold plating in the afternoon sun. Metal was stripped away. You know, it's a sign of what the Empire might once be. It's a big metropolis. It's plagued with mismanagement, aristocrats, poverty, crime. You know, it was founded before Aradin's ascension as a god, and considered itself the source of civilization for all Vastian. It was in existence already when Taldoris, the native of the place, became the Grand Prince, the first one, and conquered it. So it's an old city-state, even by it's older even by Taldor terms. That's an important thing to say about it. Basically, when Aradin became a deity of man, created the city of Absalon, the faith spread to Taldor pretty quickly. It's constructed of stone, marble, granite, and bricks. It's got over 6,000 years of history, and a lot of it is on display. So, I won't dive into the city districts and stuff like that. There are a bunch of them. There are 16 it's 15 districts, and a 16th one called the Grand Bridge Vagabond Camp. That's not usually considered part of it, but there's 15 full districts. I can name it, so that's a fine thing to go over. Arden's View, Canal Roll, Crown's Gate, Eastport, Grand Bridge, Imperial Square, Jasher Island, Lions Gate, Memorial Park, Narrows, Senate Hill, Seven Towers, West Park, Westport, Worldbreaker Hill. You know that name. And of course then the Vagabond Camp. So if you want to check any of those out, you can look more into a lot of them. Anyway, yeah. So that is, of course, it is also, the city is also delved into a lot in the War of the Crown series, so if you want to check that out, you can find more about that. Oh. I forgot to switch to this. This nice picture of opera. So there. There's that nice picture and a big old bridge there that's in there. The massive Grand Bridge of the Empire connects the opera with the river's distant south shores. And fourthmost, the river is filled with shipping traffic. So that's the Grand Bridge of the Empire they're showing off in this picture. I forgot that one. Now I can. Yay! But that's opera. The Porthmost Prefecture, named for the general who led the first army of exploration. With Porthmost Gap is in there, the Hayden Marshes, Sardis Township as a settlement, Hayden, Karaku, Stavin's Hold. Karaku, I'll mention at very least a little bit. It's in the foothills of the southern World's Mountains. It's known as the City of 100 Fountains. It hits on top a natural spring that brings water to the surface. And they've harnessed it as a source of both fountains to give its town its name, and a lot of bathhouses that draw tourists from Taldor. So, a very neat little place there. The City of 100 Fountains. As Staven's Hold, another place that's there, it was motivated by the Grand Prince Staven III. He saw the project as a base to strengthen the crown and came to power and invert the critics. So it was founded fairly recently overall. Staven's Hold. So just to mention that one. It's a newer town. Safara Prefecture, longest, most heavily fortified border with Qadira, stretching from the border woods to Urfa Halji, with the Grand Duchess Orginis Vorbeller. I'm butchering so many of these names. Within that area is, of course, Zimmar, one of the main defensive Taldan strongholds against further invasions from the south. It is basically what if the war with Qadria would continue again, which the Grand Campaign ended over 100 years ago. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen again. This is a bastion for the Taldan army and home to several Taldan phalanx regiments. So it is ready to fight. Basically, even though they're not at war with Qadria, this city, has been watching their neighbor since 4079. And it's one of the most heavily fortified settlements in all of Taldor. It's ready if another army happened again. The Tandak Province, named after Tandak Plains, is borders with Ered in the east, the Selin River, Verduin Forest. It contains Casimir and the smaller port citadel of Rydenport. We're going to talk about both of those. Grand Duchess Sierra Terbin. Casimir, the second largest city in the Empire of Taldor, is the major trade city. Port goods throughout the Inner Sea come to this place here, utilize the Selin River. It's also where the greatest imperial shipyards of Taldor are, and a lot of the fleet itself is, though again, there's big shipyards, most of it is stationed in Opera of the imperial fleet. So it grew in size because it became an important port for the navy. And so a small harbor grew into fortified ramparts and grew into the strength it is now. And that is, of course, Casimir. It's got 7 districts. The Abbey Green, Admiral's Fen, the unofficial district of Dog's Teeth, Old Casimir, Greyard's Shadow, Three Gates, Imperial Navy shipyards. And Rydenport, also to name that one, it's known to be the settlement where the home of General Arnstianth, the Taldan hero responsible for imprisoning the Whispering Tyrant, came from. That's why it's a point of interest. You know, the hero of the Shining Crusade. They've got a statue of them in the square. Okay. It's 200 feet tall, built of solid marble, and is a testament to the pride the town feels for its most famous son. It's got a 200-foot tall marble statue of a man. That's a lot larger than I thought it was. Oh my god, I missed that part of that there. Jesus. Oh. It has a lot of infantry that helps support the Taldan Navy. And if Casimir is filled up with docks, there's a secondary docks for a lot of things going on. Of course, there's the Verduin province, which encompasses the vast woodland located within the country. This is a wildly wilderness with a few pocket settlements. It does have like the settlement of Belhaim, which is on the tributary of the Velvin Fork in the Verduin Forest in Taldor. Yeah. It's got a Baroness in charge of it, Baroness Orgetta Devi. So yeah. And then there's the White Mark Prefecture, the mountainous region has traded hands with Qadira a number of times for the past 1,000 years. And the Grand Duchess Vexius Darenhal is in charge of it. So this is the area that's gone back and forth in the battles with Qadira a lot, so it's had some issues. Within this area is the Monastery of Seven Forms. It's underground city built around a Tien monastery in the prefecture. It was a Tien monastery founded some 2,000 years ago by monks of the Order of the Stalwart Fist from Tianzi. Their distance from there was a decision that they made conscientiously. So basically people would have to have the patience to cross Casmarin to come there. It was claimed by Qadria, conquered by Qadria in 4079. Basically, Qadria blood was put into the community during its occupation. Even the Empire reclaimed it. They have lost all 7 of their original forms. They now teach a style of lightning-fast strikes that mimic both dervish dances and arid desert winds. They have this combination of Casmarin and Taldan arts, such as Rondelo and fencing, is what they teach now. So they kind of changed their things. And then there's the World's Edge province, which is basically the World's Edge mountains and the borders, which within there is Caravincus, which is technically in Taldor, but it's part of one of the provinces, and is a dwarven hold. It is one of the original Sky Citadels. It still connects to the connection to the Darklands. Unlike other ones, this was built by the dwarfs soon after the Quest for the Sky as a fortress in order to continue their war against the orcs. It's one of the 4 that remain in dwarven hands. It only has about 2,500 dwarfs that connected by a garrison of about 400, so it's not a lot of individuals at this point in time. Most inhabitants are in the central keep. The outskirts of the citadel have been abandoned from regular attacks of the Darkland creatures, Draggers, mongrel folk, and worse. So yeah. Because a lot of the mines have been and wealth have gone from this place, most of the populace went to the Five Kings Mountains. Those that remain, though, are proud of their home, and they refuse to seal the Darklands tunnels. They refuse them as a connection to the Quest for the Sky. They do welcome assistance from adventurers who are willing to go and fight underground menaces, though, and support them. Also in this region is Maheto, is a heavily defended city in the foothills of the Wilderness Mountains. It's a home to skilled dwarven craftsmen whose blade and products are in high demand throughout the Empire's ruling class. They're a symbol of allegiance to Taldor as legendary sword Turlag, who was given to the Grand Prince Arthun, which the blade commensurate by slaying an ancient dragon named Thurlug, and it's a masterpiece of dwarven craftsmanship. It's home to 10 legions of the Taldian Phalanx and 2 legions of the Taldian Horse. And finally, Wispa, which is in the depths of the Verduin Forest. It's a gnomish city, responsible for Taldor's supply of timber and woodcrafts, which it supplies timber to Casimir, and it helps the Taldan Navy, its power. It was originally a lumber yard with permission of the druids of the Wildwood Lodge, but it's grown into a city, and it has a lot, and gnomes have basically kind of moved in there. But there are a lot of other fae, dwarves, elves, humans, halflings, half-elves, the small number of humans in comparison. So the gnomes are the main ones that control this. Oh, woo! That's the prefectures and cities of Taldor. Now we can talk about Well, we'll talk about the relationships, but then we'll talk about the military as we show off one of the line blades here. So, Taldor uses the Lion Blades, who are the nation's spy organization show here, to keep a close eye on many of its neighbors. Of course, Qadira is the worst. There was an occupation for nearly 500 years. The enslaved city of Zimmar, a lot of settlements around there put to the torch. They basically allowed the even-tongue conquest. So there's a lot of hatred for Qadira. The Zamir Corsairs plague Qadrian shippings from Catherine to Sigyn, and the nations raid each other across the borders. So there's a group of Corsairs that are basically, I guess, privateers for Taldor that raid specifically Qadria. Qadria wants to go to war with Taldor again, but Taldor is ready to fight his part. Now, Taldor would not declare war there. Qadria fighting itself is one thing. Qadria has people that would help defend it, not its aggression. Of course, Cheliax has a complex relationship. It's mutual mistrust. Many of Taldor would see Cheliax wiped off the face of the earth. They don't like what happened with the Even-Tongue conquest, shattering the empire. And of course, House Thrune, being in charge of it, really makes them unhappy. Cheliax doesn't really pay attention to Taldor, though. They see it as like a toothless old lion that isn't really a threat. But again, they have a lot of military, so the Queen of Cheliax knows to just keep the peace between the two. Of course, there's Galt, who's got revolutions and blood and, problems. Border guards basically keep a lot of people out, and basically people trying to run from oppressive rulers are really not allowed through the border. Just keep your stuff to yourself. The endless violence of evolution is an illustration proof that destabilizing social order in Taldor would lead to ruin. So basically, Galt's example means that your average Taldan citizen is like, I don't like some of the things that are going on here. I don't like that even more. Of course, Absalon. Taldor always wanted to join the Empire. It's never fallen to foreign conquest. And, agents have always infiltrated it, hoping to merge it with the Empire. This desire to join the Empire has been tempered in recent years. Absalon doesn't look at Taldor as a serious threat, ever. But the two are strong allies, trading partners, and, Taldor's navy does help keep piracy and invasions out from Absalon. So they are in good terms. Andoran? Well, that's a weird position too. They're at peace. But Taldan considers Andoran part of the Empire. Basically a freedom-loving child who's lost its way. The Grand Prince is distrusted and disliked by Andorans, because even with her progressive reforms, because they would hope that, with the end of the bloodline, there would have been a people's revolution in Taldor to limit their own. But, with her ascension, that kind of keeps it from happening. But, they're animal with each other. Andoran doesn't try to push their democratic ideologies too strong in Taldor. But they might suggest some things and reforms and stuff that, hey, you could do these things to make yourself a little bit more democratic. Maybe elect the Senate or something like that. The Queen, the Grand Princess doesn't need as much power. Things like that. Talking of the Lion Blades and the Taldor military. So, there are a lot of armed forces, and there was power and prestige in the army's exploration in the past. But right now, the power is divided into 3 sections. The Taldan Horse, the Taldan Phalanx, and the Taldan Imperial Navy. They're all commanded by High Strategos Maximar Pythons. Of course, I mentioned the Lion Blades, who are specialized in subterfuge, urban combat, and are recruited from Opera's best bardic colleges. So the Lion Blades are an elite order of bard spies from Taldor. Yep. They protect the interest of Taldor and its ruler. So that's an interesting thing. And it's good use of bards. Not gonna lie. So, yep. The military has a proud history, things like being involved in the Shining Crusade, a lot of the armed forces, and certainly with the Whispering Tyrant returning, the recently threatened nation of Absalon, things going on in the world. The military is still concerned with Qadira, but Harbathon is definitely a pretty bad thing. So a lot of new Navy ships are being built. The Taldor Navy is being basically shored up at a much higher rate than it has in the last few, maybe millennia, actually. And technically the Zemir Corsairs are a legitimate part of it. They are the pirates who can press the service. The Taldan Horse comprise of both horse and elephant units, even though they're known collectively as horse. They're cavalry, basically. So there's horse legions and elephant legions, too. And, of course, the phalanx, which are archers and spearmen. Just to keep an idea of the forces in the military. And, of course, there's a lot of economic disparity between places. Ruling class is wealth and privilege, the poor, desperate, infrastructure is neglected. Yeah. Alright. Let's talk about the society that is Taldor for a little bit here. So, most of the ruling class is inherited in dynasty inheriting houses. Lineages go back far into the past. A lot of them hold very old Byzantine titles: Patriarch, Magister, Consul, Manador, Exarch, Viceroy, Duke, others. A large number of scholars of the Primogen Library basically update and keep things updated in genealogical records. And each title has a subtle place in the hierarchy of the empire. Again, it's 6,000 years of people gaining titles. So, in the history, the royals have been contributed to the greatness of emperors. It's also been the downfall. The Grand Princess can raise a citizen or senator of the empire up to royalty by bestowing a title and wealth, and can only do so once a year in a huge celebration in the Imperial Palace known as the Grand Day of Exaltation. And unfortunately, even though now we have a Grand Princess, there's a lot of sexism in Taldan politics. It's changing with Grand Princess Eutropia's ascension, but yeah. So let's talk about some ranks and privileges that exist, and then we'll talk about Centaurial class, and then the bearded. Ranks and privileges. Oh, boy. So there's a bunch of noble titles. And the citizens remain several ranks in which they retain special functions with the state. A lot of these titles have lost meaning and grandeur, but these are some of the most recognizable and important of them. The Grand Duke. Ruler Prefecture. The title is limited to a maximum of 62 Grand Dukes, 12 Grand High Dukes who rule the formally recognized prefectures, and 50 lesser Grand Dukes whose lands have been lost or subsumed by other prefectures over time. Governor is appointed by the crown who rules a province. Many governors also bear the title of Lesser Grand Duke. Duke. Landed dukes, administrators of a duchy within a prefecture who reports to the Grand Duke thereof. Dukes have not been conferred land, but serve a Grand Duke, are referred to as attending dukes. There's also senators. All senators must bear another noble title in order to be installed in the Senate. All senators may vote in the Senate. Marquises serve the guard of the wilderness or border regions, has a standing army to defend the region. Count or earls are both administrators of a county within a duchy, and basically titles of equivalent rank. Landgraves have a similar function to marquises. They administer unsettled but important tracts of land. They do not command armies to defend the region, so they're less than marquises. Landed barons, or barons in general, rule large territories known as baronies, and may have a significant portion of land with numerous villages, a large city. Barons do not administer a barony, often serve as advisors to a crown. Baronet are lesser assistants to a baron who carry out many of the mundane administrative tasks of the barony. Viscount oversees a portion of the county, typically a couple of small villages connecting roads. A tribune serves a major as mayor or justice for a community, such as a village or a neighborhood within a large city. They're often elected positions, who may be conferred upon an individual for political reasons. They report to barons. Lord is the ruler of specific lands. They report to barons, though they occasionally report to a viscount. And of course, knight is the lowest rank. Typically, children of knowers are conferred this title first, especially those in military service. The senatorial class consists of hereditary members of the Senate. Remember, you have to have a title to be a senator also. And they govern the prefectures, various heads of bureaucracy. They're exceptionally good work, long loyal to the empire. A citizen can achieve the title in a senatorial class. Remember, you can be conferred a title, and once you have a title, you can be senator. Social status for both royalty and senators are historically tied to their lavish beards, referred to as bearded. The greater, more extravagant beards are a sign of higher status, and there was a time when the wearing of beards was limited by law to nobles. Now, the unbearded is the underclass, which make up 99% of Taldor's population. They're merchants, craftsmen, day laborers, dock workers, vagabonds, soldiers, sailors, so on. There's a lot of taxes, policies of the ruling class that keeps the right of them in poverty. There have been careful advances of key citizens to keep compatriots ever hopeful that hard work and long loyalty, they could join the ranks of the bearded. Taldor's military and civil services usually offer some advancement, and because the branches of the military are very loyal and strong. So it's sort of like, hey, if you want to get somewhere in life, join the civil service or the military, and look, you can advance your way up the ladder. Maybe you're not quite the royal class, but you can get closer. In the countryside, most of the Taldor people live as serfs, farmers, craftsmen, sometimes even slaves to their lords or the governor. And even worse, some lords or governors send soldiers against one another, and then basically the unbearded get caught up in it. Now, who lives here? The Taldane people. I mean, I have had a discussion in a previous episode, but that's besides the point, of the Taldane people. They are the main group here. I talk about them if you want to see everything about that. A couple other things is the traditional weapon of Taldor is the falcata, and Taldan duelist trains with in a form of a falcata and buckler combat known as rondello. So that's a bit of an extra thing to know about too. Let's see here, and of course, there's a long-standing anti-Quadrian, anti-Kelishite, and anti-Sarenrae kind of ideas that are in there, that because of a lot of prejudices, and that especially exists in the southern borders, closer to that area. And, you know, again, sexism is a very big thing in the entire thing. Because there's been a lot of agnatic succession. Again, it's changing, and has changed probably a lot more over the last couple hundred years, but 6,000 years of ingrained stuff means it's very hard to get rid of a lot of that sexism and, you know, thing where a lot of only males can inherit. We're getting some females in there now, just, you know, we're changing Taldor for the better. It's just slow. And Taldor is still issues. And finally, let's talk about some things that live here, because traditionally, for being settled for thousands of years, the Heartland's free of basically dangerous beasts and monsters. They've been pretty much killed off. Places like the Druid-controlled Verdant Forest still holds, like, Ettercaps, Fae, other things like that. Fog Peak, which borders with Galt, still has a number of giants and Thunderbirds displayed here, which can kind of be a threat occasionally. And, of course, there are orcs, which can raid from lairs in the World's Edge Mountains. The Hold of Belkazin isn't the only place. There's a bunch of orcs in the World's Edge Mountains. Some kind of do some raids occasionally. So there are some threats that still exist, and some other creatures that exist within Taldor. Just not many. The majority of the place is free from most dangers. You will not get dangerous beasts, monsters, or probably in a lot of areas, threats of things like bandits and stuff. It's, with all of its ups and downs and being a very imperial, oppressed rule in a way, well, not super oppressed, not great shape rule, poor rule, it's a pretty safe place to live. Maybe not great place to live. It's safe. Anyway, I think we can leave Taldor there. Hey, we got through it. Taldor is a definitely interesting country to talk about. It has a lot of ups and downs, and certainly there are a lot of goods and bads about the country. Certainly, if you're going to rank, to privilege, to royalty, you're in much better shape than your average person. But it's not without change and growth, and it's that weird point in time that it was once this great, powerful empire. It has a history that dates back an incredibly long time. Its capital, even older than its empire, its capital being this city that grew out of a bunch of refugees. That is ancient. That is the fall of Aslaneth, the age of darkness, the end of all human civilization grew out of that. These settlers grew from just nothing to the greatest of Aztec empire, perhaps, controlling most of the continent. And yes, they had massive successes, but they pushed themselves too far and fell from grace. And old enemies, deep enemies, have caused them many wounds. And certainly, if the empire is still falling, it's a slow, tedious death at this point in time. They still have a lot of money. They still have a lot of power. They still have a lot of strength. They will not go down without a very strong fight. But change is coming, albeit very, very slow. Things like the ancient sexism that isn't seen a lot, well, seen some places, but not a lot of other places, that is deeply ingrained here. The idea that males inherit titles. And now we finally have our first Grand Princess, who still has the ancient bloodline, traces it back. I think that's the important thing about that, is traces back deep into the line of the Taldor rulers. Now we kind of see this evolution of the entire thing. A change. Is this soon enough? I think that's the important part about it. Is this soon enough? Is this a time where history can change? And again, there have been times the crown has passed to families with very loose connections to the royal family, when there's no direct mail, or the law of primogeniture did not apply. There has been a lot of issues in Taldor. We can't say what this will become now. That's a heavy question. We can't say. We know that it's strong, it's rich, and change is possible, though slow. I don't know if it's going to be quick enough for it to survive, for it to evolve. because changes will be needed for it to evolve. The pressures of its neighbors, other than threats, Qadira, Carbathon still existing. He might have been defeated, but he is still a threat. And Taldor knows that. The world of Golarion is changing and evolving. And fairly rapid. It is a new age. A tumultuous age. And if Taldor survives for another 6,000 years, well, it might not be the great empire it was. But it could become something better. Just maybe. Who knows? We'll have to see. Anyway, we'll leave it there on that kind of note of we'll have to see what's going on with Taldor in the future. Because, honestly, that's the truth. It is in this perilous point where it could either rise or fall. Which that will be, I can't say. I don't think any of us can say. But if you enjoyed this, I do more Pathfinder-related stuff and tabletop-related stuff. Make sure to check out me live on twitch.tv/Dracovin Empire. Or if you miss it live, you can always check me out, or only still part of this, check me out on youtube.com/the Dracovin Empire on both. I put the videos up a couple days, usually a day or two after I usually do these live. If you're joining me live, follow would be great. If you're joining me on YouTube, subscription would be great. Ring the bell, liking the video, leaving a comment. Hey, there's a comment for both sides, so you can give it to me if you're hanging around here. Have you had any adventures in things like Taldor? Have you done the War of the Crown? I'm actually interested. That might be a fun one to roleplay one point in time. Maybe when I'm done first the Crimson Throne. We probably wait to do it. It's not a political throne. We might do a political throne in the future. You never know. Definitely you never know on that one. Let's see here. Anything else to shout out? Make sure check out my social medias. I've got a Discord, twitter.com link below. Check out both channels, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm gonna say scheduling. You want to see the tabletop stuff? Pathfinder stuff's usually on Thursdays afternoon, between 1 and 2. Tuesdays I do more stuff, and Saturdays I do it. Tuesdays same time. Saturdays late morning, usually World of Darkness stuff. The Crimson Queen, my Curse of the Crimson Throne playthrough with players. It's really fun. Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Check that out. And of course, Discuss Tabletop Saturdays at 6. All that stuff. Okay. That's all the shoutouts. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to get running. I'll see all of you next time for more Pathfinder or other tabletop-related stuff. But until then, I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.